So Assalamualaikum once again to the listeners as well as the speakers for the Middle Nation briefing on Indonesia, with the focus on ASEAN, but we are talking about Indonesia today. Indonesia's story, we know that it's one of constant negotiation between unity and division since independence. And ASEAN is, I mean, it's basically the heart of ASEAN, essentially. Indonesia being the largest, with the largest population in all of ASEAN, and with its diversity and with the recent turmoil that it's going through. So it's brought to our attention that we should actually talk about Indonesia. And we are going to just do a short, brief overall summary on the history of Indonesia, just to provide listeners with an understanding of Indonesia's trajectory towards 2025 today from post-colonial times. So I don't have to talk about colonialism. We already know the template, what brought the colonialists over to all of our regions. And of course, the natural resources of Indonesia was the draw. And that's what drove the colonialists over here. So whatever drove the colonialists out, the birth of the country began with Sukarno, excuse me. So with Sukarno, now I will do a brief summary based on what events happened. I'm not going to comment on the correctness or the mistakes of what actually took place. So I will leave the rest for Brother Ihsan to talk about. So what I would talk about is what actually happened. Okay, so basically Sukarno takes over, and then he had a vision of combining nationalism with religion, being a Muslim in a Muslim majority country, with religion. So by religion meaning Islam and communism, because at the time that was a feature in a lot of post-colonial independence pursuits. It was this anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist pursuits was also tied with the communist ethos. So Sukarno felt that all of this had to be combined in his nation-building project. So he believed that this was an essential component of defining Indonesia's national identity, because all of these pursuits were what he calls, being in the same ship. He calls it being in the same ship. So everyone, these ideas, or not, it's not ideology really. All of these points, the nationalism, religion, and communism, all had the same goal and had to work together in pursuing that one uniting goal of national unity. So that was the basis of his nation building. And then so this is where in the agenda, if you look at it, he calls it Nasakom. Nasakom is basically an abbreviation in Bahasa Indonesia: nationalism, agama, which is religion, and communist. I think the way it's pronounced in Indonesian is different, but it's basically an abbreviation of those terms. So, and then I also highlighted in the meeting agenda some of the key personalities that were involved in the conflicts between ideas of nation building, Sukarno's idea of nation building, but I will not go into that right now. And then again, just to provide for listeners on a brief history and trajectory of Indonesia from post-colonialism to modernity. So after Sukarno, we will talk about. In the agenda, I listed some of the ideas and social development that went into the social development of Indonesia, because Indonesia is a collection of many islands of different cultures and different ethnicities whose languages and heritage vary. So it's often a misconception for outsiders, because they think that Indonesia is just this one uniform, united body of culture, but it's not the case. They all form different. They have a variety of cultures and languages and how do I put this? It's truly a manifestation of unity and diversity. They're a very diverse community, much to, it surprises a lot of people to realize that. And even the development of the language, Indonesian, Bahasa Indonesian, is also something that a lot of people are not aware of. So this would be, it's not like in China, I mean, in China, they have also the language Mandarin that unifies the country, but they also have the same story. They have different ethnicities, different languages, and the communist China actually imposed a national pursuit in making Mandarin the lingua franca of all Chinese people. But that's a topic for another time. But Indonesia also has a similar pursuit in unifying the country through a common language. So that's something that Brother Abu Bakar will elaborate on. And then we will talk about Suharto. This is post-Sukarno. So there will be Suharto, and for anyone familiar with the brief, cursory history, will hear about the anti-communist pursuit of Suharto. So we will talk about that briefly, and then we'll talk about the post-Suharto era of leadership in Indonesia, and then the return of the political dynasty of Indonesian politics with Megawati Soekarno Putri, who is the daughter of Sukarno, coming into power, and then leaders after Megawati Soekarno Putri, and then up to Prabowo's leadership today. So without further ado, I will just give Brother Ihsan the time to speak about the points that he has raised about Indonesia and its history. So Brother Ihsan, please.
Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm sorry, maybe I will mostly speak in Indonesian. I'm not really fluent in English.
Feel free.
But I'll try to make. Before we talk about Nasakom, we should look farther in the past. Nasakom have the roots in the aftermath of the Java War that I write on my points I sent the group. We should start at 1830. That was the end of Java War. The Java War basically is a rebellion by a prince of Yogyakarta named Prince Diponegoro, once of Indonesian hero. Why I say that we should look further in the past, because in my view, the Javanese people at that time was already a Muslim society, but the colonization makes us into what Javanese in modern era. Perang Jawa yang dipimpin oleh Pangeran Diponegoro, saya kira adalah titik poin yang menjadi perubahan cara berpikir kolonial terhadap Indonesia. Karena itu setelah Perang Jawa, kolonial Belanda merasa takut dengan Islam yang ada di Indonesia. Oleh karena itu dilakukanlah beberapa proyek-proyek, antara lain seperti Javanology, that is institute to learn about Java and the society. And the products of the institute was what we called pemisahan antara golongan santri. Santri means someone who learned much about the religion, and abangan is common people, and the priayi is people from the kerajaan. The three inspiration that after the contact with modernization that turned the three groups into Nasakom.
Okay.
The santri become the agama, the priayi become the nationalist, and the Abangan become communist. Basically, that the root was there.
So it was an interaction of, it's a reaction of the things that was imposed by the colonialists.
I think so.
That came up with these three goals, that developed into these three goals, right? Nationalism and really.
Three groups, yes.
Yes, it's because of the Javanese War. It started off this type of mindset because the colonialists wanted to group the religious
Yes.
Muslims. They wanted to identify the cultural Javanese.
Yes.
Correct. And then they started to make these groups and divisions. So
yes.
Yeah, so in the nation building, we needed to unite these three groups.
Yeah, politically,
because you are in,
yes, but we have another problem.
Yes.
Not only politically, but pembentukan nasionalisme Indonesia itu terjadi setelah adanya modernisasi, setelah adanya politik etis, yaitu setelah orang-orang Indonesia menerima pendidikan ala Barat. Itu adalah awal mula dari nasionalisme Indonesia. Dalam hal ini dari ketiga kelompok nasionalis, agama, dan abangan, nasionalislah yang maju di tengah dan yang akan membentuk wajah Indonesia selanjutnya. And that's the spirit of Sumpah Pemuda in 1828.
Okay.
There ada perwakilan dari beberapa kelompok, baik suku ataupun kelompok agama. Dalam hal ini hanya agama Islam yang mengirimkan kelompok, sementara kelompok yang lain berbasiskan pada suku bangsa. Kalau kita melihat di situ ada dua poin penting pada tahun 1920-an ini yang akan menjadi cikal bakal dari Indonesia. Yang pertama adalah Sumpah Pemuda itu sendiri, dan yang kedua adalah Tan Malaka, hasil terbuat Tan Malaka. He was the architect of the Republic. So he has the book Republic Indonesia before we even think about that.
Okay.
So basically after that, the ASEAN people become leaders. And long story short, in 1942, the Japanese defeat the Dutch. We are under Japanese occupation. Di bawah pemerintahan Jepang, Indonesia diberikan janji untuk merdeka. Nah, itu adalah awal mula Indonesia membentuk tentara nasional, that is PETA, pembela tanah air, that will evolve into our TNI right now. Yeah, and after 1945, there was a period of war. Ada satu liputan dari Al Jazeera kalau tak salah, yang menceritakan tentang bagaimana Belanda memanipulasi cerita tentang 1945 sampai dengan 1949. That basically said that it's a police operation or something like that, while it is a war between two nations. And yeah, during that time, we are not only fighting the Dutch, but we were fighting each other between us, nationalists versus some Islamists. There are
the communists
Islam,
also.
and yes, the communists tried to.
Yeah.
1948.
Okay.
So actually, we lost the war in 1949. But the international
powers,
desakan internasional ya mendorong Belanda untuk akui kedaulatan Indonesia pada tahun 1949. That's
yang bagi kuasa pada Soekarno.
Yes.
So yeah, this is the thing. Kalau because if you want to talk about nation building, kuasa is important. So the one who that's why he had to undermine that. That's why he had to control any opposition. So Hamka was arrested. Tan Malaka already passed away by that time.
Yes.
Tan Malaka he already passed away. So yeah, he was the radicalist in the PKI, and so in order to he want to hold on to his power, he had to do what he had to do lah, Sukarno. and then to try to build the country. So we will not go more into those details. This is just to give some idea for Indonesians, people from outside of Indonesia to have an idea about the starting of the beginning of independent Indonesia.
If I understand, the formation of Sukarno's political philosophy of joining these three elements within the society was inspired by the sort of the reality and the mythology around the Javanese War, because you had the three elements all uniting in that war, meaning sort of the nationalists being sort of represented kind of by the elites, the religious element, and then the communists representing sort of the peasantry. And they were all united in the war. And so he sort of metamorphosized this into a political categories of nationalists representing sort of the secular educated elites who also wanted to free Indonesia, the religious bodies that wanted to free Indonesia, and the peasantry that wanted to free Indonesia. And he gave them the political categories of nationalist, religious, and communist. Am I understanding correctly?
I think the brother was saying that the Java War was, as you pointed out, it was the convergence of all these three elements, but
Right.
the divisions were a creation of the colonialists because they wanted to group the Muslims for their religiosity. I think this is regardless of class. They just wanted to group Muslims who are religious and, of course, the secularists who are the cultural Javanese. They are not identified or categorized as elitist per se, but the cultural adat they call it. So this is and they try to very heavily promote the adat of Indonesia in order to sow a religiosity and division. So this was a categorization that they created, and then they of course identified the communists, which also was found in different classes, and then this was a categorization by the Dutch, and because like Idrus points out in the message, is kind of a divide and conquer attempt. So it was just a categorization and grouping created by the Dutch in order to constantly make these divisions, point out these divisions, and then this evolved later on because Sukarno saw that, okay, this is Indonesia, this is our home, this is where we are. All of us are not going to leave Indonesia. So since this is our home, we have to form our national identity, our national story. So he came up with Nasakom. This is the way I look at it. But Brother Ihsan wants to provide a background on the cause for this division. Why is there a nationalistic identity, and why is there the communist and the Muslim, identity among the Indonesians? So again, the origin is divide and conquer, and of course, I think the tactic would be to malign the Muslims. Oh, you're not culture, you're abandoning your adat. So we need to emphasize the adat, which is another angle that Brother Ihsan is trying to go at with the Pancasila and the I can't pronounce the actual word, the one that brought the theory, the unifying motto of uniting all of Indonesians despite their differences, the cultural diversity. Because like you said, Javanese are all Muslims, but but after the war, there are non-Muslim Javanese. Okay, so this is Brother Ihsan is talking about that. So the Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, the unity in diversity, that motto is derived from promoting culture, all of the different cultures, and all of the different cultures don't necessarily have a tie-up to Islam. So this is pre-independence. This was the Dutch attempt to, again, sow division and malign the Muslims for not, clinging on to their Jahiliyyah culture, for example. So during the Javanese War, yang tiga gelombang ni, they united, right? To fight
They
the
doesn't exist at the time.
Okay.
No, there is no priyayi, there is no abangan, there is no santri. We're all Islam, we're all santri. We're all santri.
So the
So,
ones that fought the Dutch were only the Santris,
oh,
who are the
we're
Muslims.
all Santri, we're all Muslims at the time,
Okay.
and
Okay.
yeah, the aftermath of the war, the Dutch is a fear of Islam, and yeah,
So the Dutch
yeah.
needed to create the division.
The division, yes.
Yes. So what he's saying is that the Javanese war was represented by the Santris, who are the Muslims. So it was a unified confrontation, identified as Muslims confronting the Dutch. But then the post-war, I think the Dutch needed to create that narrative of the nationalists, of the communists and the Muslims. I think the Dutch tried to group the Javanese into these three groups. Yang gelombang ni buatin oleh Dutch. Is that what you're saying, Brother Ihsan?
Yes. According to MC records,
Okay.
in his book.
Okay, so this is and we can take it as an interpretation of events. So this is why my intention is to go into talking about post when the colonialists left and the birth of Indonesia. Whatever the backstory is, the reality is Sukarno felt that this is Indonesia. In Indonesia, we have these three people, these three groups of ideology. We need to unite them under one ship, because we are in the ship. We cannot fight each other, because if we fight each other, then the ship will sink. None of us will survive. So if we want to survive, we have to unite and we have to build towards a future for Indonesia. So this was his vision. But then his vision for unity was not always met with positivity by the groups, particularly the communists. They were always trying to undermine. And it was shown in the confrontation with Malaysia, and in the region also. The communists were constantly undermining the nation building because of their own ideologies, of their own interests, and of course the outside intervention and outside interference also. So in order to achieve stability and the goal of, again, nation building, Suharto went after the communists. So we enter into the era of Suharto, and Suharto's era is, I think, let me see the year. I can't remember the time of should be around 1965 onwards, the anti-communist era of Suharto. And of course, the 30 September event that happened that went after the communists. So he was really climbing down on the communists because they were really undermining the development and security of Indonesia. So once he established that, post-Suharto leadership started to develop. So what is the post-Suharto leadership? The post-Suharto leadership, Suharto fell in 1998. 1998 is the time when the Asian crisis was happening. So also a time of turmoil in the region. Also, not to mention, I mean, of course, this is because of all of the IMF issue, the IMF imposed problems in the region, and then the World Bank imposed problems in the region. We are aware of how, for example, Malaysia's Mahathir dealt with it. Thailand, it started off in Thailand, and then the repercussions were all felt all over. So after Suharto fell, it was B.J. Habibie for a short while, 2 years only. And after B.J. Habibie, it was Gus Dur, Abdurrahman Wahid. Abdurrahman Wahid, to my mind, he is a huge individual in Indonesian politics, but also his leadership was very short, only 2 years. And then after Abdurrahman Wahid came Megawati Sukarno Putri, who is the daughter of Sukarno. And she was a kind of a representation of kind of a political legacy, I guess, So she was there for a while, and for, I think, 10 years. And then we had Susilo Bambang. Susilo Bambang, SBY, he was more onto providing stability and modernization of Indonesia. And of course, I think from Susilo Bambang's leadership, I know that the acknowledging the Muslims' needs and the cultural, the identity of Muslims was crucial, and it continued, and it still continues to do so in acknowledging and validating the identity of Muslims. I don't think this has been undermined throughout the continued leadership in Indonesia. Is it correct to say so, Brother Ihsan? Would you say that the Indonesian leadership? I think you are muted, brother. You can unmute yourself.
Yes, yes. I'm sorry, there's a problem with my mouse.
It's okay. It's okay. So
Yes,
after
basically,
that,
yes, that's
yeah, and then there's Joko Widodo, and now we have Prabowo Subianto. Prabowo Subianto is he is not just a nobody. I think we also need to just emphasize. I'm sure people who are familiar with Indonesia know about this, but Subianto didn't just come into leadership like last year. I mean, he was the Minister for Defense during Jokowi's term, and he was also a general during the time of Suharto. I think he was also his son-in-law, right? His wife is the daughter of Suharto, kalau tak salah, betul? Yeah. Okay. So now can we now maybe I would give this microphone to Brother Abu Bakar to talk about the unifying factor that made Bahasa Indonesia the language of the Indonesians, because it is not it's a invented new language. Actually, it's not the unifying. It has never been a uniform language for all Indonesians. So maybe Brother Abu Bakar, if you're ready.
Yes, Assalamualaikum everyone. First of all, thank you for the opportunities to speak. As a Malaysian, I really cannot and probably should not comment very much on Indonesian because mainly I'm an outsider, and the other thing is that I don't really have a lot of information about history and stuff like that. So I'll be participating mainly as a listener, but I can maybe perhaps, inshallah, contribute a little bit on the discussion point concerning the birth of Bahasa Indonesia as it relates to all speakers of Bahasa Melayu, and which also happens to be my language, my national language in Malaysia. So there's often some level of confusion, even among people outside of Indonesia, like in Malaysia, within the region, about Bahasa Indonesia and how it relates to Bahasa Melayu. And there's actually a lot of nuance when it comes to how these two languages are related. So personally, I would say that the closest description of what the relationship is like is probably like a child to a parent. Like Bahasa Indonesia is like a child of the offspring of the Bahasa Melayu. And like all offspring, it grows up and it has its own experiences and becomes its own thing. So anyway, to answer the first question, what is Bahasa Indonesia? Bahasa Indonesia is a language that is mainly borrowed and adapted from Bahasa Melayu, which is the official language spoken officially by the Malay peoples of Southeast Asia, including even the sub-ethnic groups in throughout the region, like in Malaysia, Brunei, Singapore, and Sumatra. And even within the Malay peoples of the region, there are sub-ethnic groups, and there are like what do you call it? Dialects of Malay, such as the Minang language, Minangkabau language, and then there's also some other forms of Malay, like the Creolized Melayu, Bahasa Melayu Betawi, for instance, the Betawi Malay language, which has borrowed a lot of terms like from other languages like Javanese, Sudanese, Chinese, and Dutch. So when Indonesia became independent, there was this very, very dire need to unify the different ethnic groups throughout the country. And this is mainly due to the fact that, the Republic of Indonesia is like the 14th largest country in the world by area, and it's made up of about 17,000 individual islands and hundreds of ethnic and linguistic groups. So in order to diversify, in order to unify such a diverse mix of cultures and ethnicities, it was necessary to use an official language that was capable of doing so. Now, Bahasa Melayu was the perfect choice because for centuries long, like hundreds of years, it had been lingua franca, not only in Southeast Asia, but also throughout the world. You would find traders all the way from the West, like in the Venetians and whatnot, and the Portuguese and all those people. They would have to learn Malay in order to trade internationally. So that was actually a very big factor in why Bahasa Indonesia was adapted from the Malay language. But in order to be a unifying language, it had to be stripped of its original ethnic identity. So instead of calling it Bahasa Melayu, they changed the name to Bahasa Indonesia, and they incorporated a lot of vocabularies from different ethnic groups, especially the big ethnic groups like the Javanese and the Sundanese, for instance. So they this new language was called Bahasa Indonesia, and so it was born. This new language was born and incorporated into the culture of the country of Indonesia. So one of the things that you can really highlight about the choice of Bahasa Indonesia as the unifying language is that even after like decades of independence, Bahasa Indonesia has grown in usage, and has not only successfully unified the different ethnic groups within Indonesia, but it has also even far surpassed its parent language, Bahasa Melayu, in terms of the number of speakers. And it's actually today the 10th most spoken language in the world. So yeah, that basically is that basically covers why about Bahasa Indonesia and why it was chosen as an official language in Indonesia, and then how it relates to the rest of the region. So I'll pass back to Sister Salma now.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, brother Abu Bakar. Yeah, this is something again. I think necessary to feature because in our leadership. The briefing, because I think a lot of people are not familiar with again the diversity of this region. The assumption is everybody is just one unified, monolithic body, and it's anything but. There's a lot of diversity, a lot of differences, and they're all people from this region. But with these differences, they are unified with a language. And it's interesting that you would bring up the fact that, yes, again, so easy to overlook, but this was the lingua franca of the region. And everyone spoke Bahasa Melayu. I mean, there was a time in Singapore where I'm from, everybody spoke Melayu, everybody spoke Bahasa Melayu, regardless of race, because that's the only way to communicate effectively with other people, when you're doing trade and when you're doing diplomacy, anything, and of course, they're trying to revive that, and I hope it is rekindled and becomes a norm again, because there's a slur, like if you're a Malay who doesn't speak if you're a Malay who doesn't speak Malay, you're a Singaporean. So that's something that's not to be proud of for a lot of Singaporeans. But anyway, I digress. So that was a again brief nugget of information for listeners who are not familiar with this region. Now we will go back to the reason why we have gathered to meet today to talk about the recent protests. And I believe from what I have gathered from the news, especially on Friday, on the day of the Maulid, I don't see any escalating protests or events that has taken place. Is that correct, or am I missing something on the news, Brother Ihsan?
Yes, that's correct. No protest at all.
Yeah,
Alhamdulillah.
mashallah, alhamdulillah, that's good. Okay, so that means nothing, right? Because I kept searching the internet for news about anything that's developing. Seems like everything is quiet, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, inshallah. I think there's somebody entering. Okay, is Shahid there? Do you want to add anything to the discussion so far?
Well, I sort of want to kind of go back. I don't want to belabor the point, but I think that it's important to have an accurate and not an ideologicalized version of history. And I think that the what you can call, I guess, the sociological groups certainly did exist in Indonesia before the Javanese War. The different tiers in the society, the different there certainly were non-Muslims in Indonesia at that time. There were people who were obviously Hindus. There were people who were different religions. There were people who were different varying degrees of religiosity. And I think that what the Dutch did was to use the existing differences within the society to exaggerate those differences and use the divide and conquer strategy. But they didn't invent these categories. That wouldn't even work. They exaggerated and they elevated, for example, anyone who was less religious to administrative positions and so forth, and they gave them preference and so on. So it's not a thing where the Dutch invented divisions in the society. They exaggerated and they manipulated and they exploited existing divisions in the society. And then I think that what Sukarno eventually did was, as I said earlier, gave specific political categories to those existing sociological categories in the society under the Nasakom philosophy, saying that this is a sociological and a political reality that we have in Indonesia, that we have these at least three main categories of types of people, and we all need to understand that we are one people, and that none of these categories should be allowed to be exploited and manipulated to divide us against ourselves. And subhanallah, the introduction of Bahasa Indonesia as the lingua franca of the entirety of the population is absolutely brilliant. And as far as I know, unprecedented development. It's really an amazing thing that he did, or that Indonesia did. But I think that we have to be honest about the reality that certain divisions already existed in the society and were manipulated and exploited and exaggerated. And then Sukarno tried to bring cohesion through his political philosophy. And Allahu A'lam.
I think what Brother Ihsan was trying to convey also, the development of these groups, the intention was to undermine their connection to and association with the ulama. So if you had a kind of a social justice leaning, and if you're Muslim, there were attempts at distancing themselves.
Absolutely.
Because the lure of the idea, the ideals, pulled them away from the ulama and brought towards their ideology. It was a kind of a schism and distance. And
yeah, absolutely. Yes. Okay. There's certainly nothing that the Dutch or any colonial power, any colonizing power, there's nothing that they ever feared more than Islamic cohesion, Islamic mobilization, and mass mobilization of Muslims. There was nothing that any colonizing power ever feared more than that. So they certainly did everything that they could to undermine that, for sure.
Okay, so basically, like as we suspected, it was much ado about nothing, the protests, the turmoil in Indonesia, which is, alhamdulillah, we are grateful that we have nothing to report, which is a good thing. but maybe we will just do a brief, like what happened. So at first, what happened was President Prabowo raised the salaries of parliamentarians, and that news of those raised salaries was met with objections and protests by the public. I believe there were students who led the protests, and these protests were in pockets of the cities in Indonesia. But then things escalated and exploded when the management of the protests involved an accident. I believe it's an accident. I don't think it was intentional to kill a delivery dispatch rider. And he was killed as 21-year-old delivery dispatch rider who was killed. And then this enraged the public, and it escalated into a massive explosive protest. And then this was quickly addressed. And the actions taken by Prabowo and the country was quite swift. And I think he first acquiesced to the demand. He met their requirement in not raising the salaries of those members of parliament. And then I forget what else. Let me try to recall.
Well, first, I would say, it wasn't much ado about nothing. It certainly wasn't nothing. I think that the grievances were real. I think that it was maybe you could say more ado than was called for, rather than much ado about nothing. The grievances were real and are real because the people continue to have other grievances, and you have a whole list of demands that they put forward, that the protesters put forward. I'm not sure who actually wrote that, what organization or what committee or something of the protesters, maybe Brother Ihsan knows, who actually put together that set of demands. I think that going through the set of demands, I think that some of them are perfectly reasonable. Some of them I think are highly unrealistic, and almost all of them are unrealistic in terms of the time frame that they're putting, because they were saying that we want these demands met within the first week, then these demands within 6 months, these demands within a year, and so forth. And many of the things that they're calling for are quite reasonable. Some of them, as I say, are unrealistic, even if you give them a year. But I think that the approach of, how can I say this? There was obviously a suspicion. I don't want to hijack the meeting, but there was obviously a suspicion that there was outside interference, or external Western CIA, National Endowment for Democracy interference in trying to provoke these protests. And then there was a counter theory that the government themselves were actually provoking so that they could give themselves a rationale for cracking down. I don't buy that particular narrative. I had said earlier that it didn't make really any sense to me that there would be external, like any reason for there to be an attempt to activate a so-called color revolution in Indonesia, because the whole point of doing something like that is to put a government in power that will impose neoliberal, IMF friendly reforms on the economy that will make the austerity measures and so forth, privatization and so on and so on and so on. And the way the economic situation is in Indonesia now, and geopolitical situation is in Indonesia now, excuse me, even if you did that, no one would benefit from those types of policies more than China would. America wouldn't benefit that much from doing that. The other thing that we were talking about, you and I were talking about one time, excuse me, was that the color revolution formula of the color revolution depends upon there already existing a sort of pressure cooker in the society, that the grievances are there, and the desire for basically chaos and overthrow of the government is widespread enough in the society that you can hijack a protest movement and escalate it to the point of toppling the government. Those elements have to already be there. Kind of like what I was just saying about with the Dutch. The divide and conquer strategy only works if divisions already exist. it's very difficult to impose divisions upon a society that aren't already there to one degree or another. And so for the color revolution formula to work, there already have to be conditions on the ground where resentment is already smoldering enough that you can spark that powder keg and get it to explode the way you want it to explode. And I was doubting that level of resentment, that level of hostility existed in Indonesia to where you could actually provoke that kind of chaotic and really self-destructive response. And Alhamdulillah, Indonesia, I think, has proven that is the case for them, that they are inherently more reasonable than that, and that even if like I also sort of hypothesized that because I can't see why the U.S. would want to overthrow the government of Indonesia. I can't see what their objective would be. I can't see what they would realistically get out of it. The other possibility is that the fact of the matter is that the CIA, the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, and so forth, have been funding NGOs, have been funding organizations, have been infiltrating academia in Indonesia for decades. So you have already created a certain demographic of people who already have this mentality, who already have the mindset that the West would want them to have. So they might have just been acting on their own, on the impulses that have been implanted in them through their own indoctrination by means of decades of National Endowment for Democracy programming and so on. But ultimately, they are a minority in Indonesia. And I think that the majority of people want stability in their society, and they want legitimate grievances to be dealt with in an orderly, organized, disciplined manner through proper channels, inshallah. And hopefully, inshallah, the protest movement will recede, inshallah.
Inshallah. I mean, apart from the way Subianto dealt with the protesters by meeting their demands and requirements, for the reason why the protest was even, brought about. So he met those demands. I think the other demands are an outcome of what escalated after the incidents of the police killing one of the. He wasn't a protester. He was just on his way to work. The Grab driver who was killed. So it's not even like a police brutality per se like that. He was just on his way to work, and there was chaos on his way to delivering food, and he died as a result of that. Yes. So so there's that too. This is why I feel like the demands and the complaints have become a little bit confused after that incident. At first it escalated, it became overblown, and then it became all muddled up.
This is the thing. Is that many times a protest movement doesn't know when to stop, and when your demands have been met, when your initial demand, the initial cause for you to go out in the street and protest, when that demand has been met, you have a momentum going with your protest, and now you don't want to give it up. Now you think you want to go further, especially if you're being provoked from outside, from external forces. Then it's like, well, we've seen the government has ceded to our demands. Now maybe we have an upper hand and we can keep pushing. So let's quickly come up with a bullet point list of things that we want the government to do, and an impossible timeline, by the way, for having those things met, having those demands met, and some of which are, as absurd as, like, we want within the next, X number of days, a fair wage for everyone in Indonesia. Obviously, this is not a thing that can happen. But if you're serious, if the people who put those demands together, if those people are serious, then okay. Like I said, many of the demands I think are actually reasonable and would be beneficial for Indonesia to try to implement over the course of time, if you go through the proper channels. And I think that one of the things that I advocate throughout all of the Muslim world and throughout the global South generally is to elevate pre-existing traditional authority structures that used to run your society. Like, for example, the ulama, the religious organizations in Indonesia that can be mediators between the people and the government. They're the Ahl al-Hal wal-Aqd of the society. And if you elevate them into positions of mediation and positions of oversight and witnesses and custodians of the society and the demands of the people, then you might be able to seriously work upon achieving the demands that you have listed. And between the government and the ulama and the people, reaching an understanding of what is realistic and understanding that we are all working together to try to improve the society, because we're showing that we're not taking an adversarial approach to one another.
Exactly. I think it's particularly meaningful also to highlight that Subianto met with 16 or so leaders of religious organizations also before addressing the protest. So he sought their cooperation and he sought their help and advice in how to manage the protest as well, before things started to cool down. And there was actually talks about escalating or even reviving protests on the Maulid, which took place about 2 days ago on Friday. And that was rather concerning for me to hear because, it based off of some of the contributions in the chat, in the region's chat, it appears to be like non-Muslim Indonesian influencers who are either based abroad or maybe even within Indonesia, who want to hijack a religious gathering for the platform it provides and the group that it gathers to amplify their voices. So it's kind of, I felt that it was, to say, I mean, it's malicious, because these.
Well, it's very cynical.
Yeah.
It's very cynical because I also saw the week prior to that, I saw a video of I think it was a Singaporean who was saying, he's alarmed by what's going on in Indonesia, and he's not going to travel to Indonesia at this time. And that was on a Friday morning. And he was saying, they're having the Salatul Jum'ah now, so you can expect that when everyone pours out of the masjid after Salatul Jum'ah, they're all going to go into the streets and it's going to escalate. And it didn't. And that's a very important sign of what the actual sentiment is of the people. And that in and of itself is also an indication of external provocation, that you're trying to start something. And I'll just repeat, though, I still don't understand what would be the motive for an external provocation, except either we're talking about Westerners who are themselves so deeply propagandized that they don't know that there's a reason why color revolutions work and don't work and why they are used and why they are not used. And they just think that this is just what we do. If there's any sort of a grievance, if there's any sort of a protest movement, our reflex knee-jerk response is to try to hijack that and topple the government, because you're not going to get anything out of it by toppling the government of Indonesia. You'll get nothing out of it. And then the other thing I was thinking was just, is it possible that they're just trying to harass because Indonesia joined BRICS, and they're trying to just show that we can destabilize your society and hinder your reforms and your progress and so on. But even that doesn't really make sense strategically. So, I mean, if we assume that the people who are making these types of decisions have a strategic mindset, then it doesn't make sense to me. So I'm left with just assuming that we're talking about an indigenous demographic of people who have themselves been indoctrinated and westernized, that they have taken upon themselves the same mentality and the same ideology of neoliberal, basically neocon Western mindset, that we should always try to topple a government that we think is wrong and so on. Very childish. And it shows that the fact that you can't get really mass Muslim participation in this shows you that you're not going to get very far. And it shows you that this is not a truly indigenous sentiment in Indonesia. And then the fact that the government is responding the way they have, which is to I think to listen and to be responsive to the demands of the protesters. I think it's good. And then now is when we'll really see how serious these protesters were, because now there is a window for getting the demands that you listed, because now you've given us a list of things that you want the government to do. Now we'll see how well they are going to work on those, achieving those demands through available channels.
Mhm.
Whether they're going to actually work seriously for getting these demands done, or whether these were just complaints that they were making for the purpose of justifying further protests.
Exactly. Okay, we have a contribution from someone in the comments from Mohtaram. An Islamic organization took initiative to meet with Prabowo, and Prabowo warmly welcomed the initiative. Since the beginning of his term, Prabowo has been quite focused on reaching out to Muslims compared to the Jokowi era. In fact, he even told those closest to him that when he created the free nutritious meals program for students, he admitted that one of his intentions was to feed Muslims, as 85% of the population of his population is Muslim. So anyway, yeah, this is again a piece of information to indicate that he is reaching out, making gestures to demonstrate his mashallah support and in the benefit, of course, and the development of the Muslims. And so I think it's evident from the calls for protests over the Maulid and the fact that it didn't escalate into protests, and it just I suppose I can say that it just proceeded with the Maulid, then, because obviously there's not going to be any news of the Maulid, but they all gathered for the Maulid, and that's all that took place, because we don't hear about anything else happening in the news. So alhamdulillah for that. And it's really, really crucial to take note and observe if these protesters who have made these demands, as Shahid said, if they will follow through, or are they just seeking to, I don't know, be disruptive overall, just make noise and cause chaos in the society, and basically throwing a tantrum and expecting to be appeased. Because from the sounds of it, from what I've read on the list of demands, that's how it seems to me. Because a lot of the points are not well thought out. Sure, there's a couple of points that are valid, yes, but it's just a coincidence. I think it's a coincidence that they have some valid points, but overall, it just seems like a tantrum.
Yeah, and this will also show, or should show it. You should watch. Everyone should watch. Everyone should monitor what happens over the next 6 months, over the next year in Indonesia with regards to these demands. Because if the people who are making those demands don't themselves do practical steps, take practical steps for seeing those demands met, seeing those demands implemented in a realistic way, if they don't work on that, then this is why you get protest crackdowns, because the government has already deemed you unserious people who just want to disrupt. So now is your opportunity to prove that you are not unserious people, that you really are interested in the betterment and the improvement of Indonesia and the advancement and the betterment of the society, that you're sincerely, genuinely, seriously interested in that, and you're willing and ready to work for that through existing channels or by creating channels of your own. Like I said, you can elevate the status of existing authority structures, traditional authority structures, by bringing them into the process of trying to get these demands met. Create local provincial councils, say provincial committees, to review, for example, if you want fair wages, review the wage system in that province, in that state, contrasted with the cost of living in that particular locality, and then interface with businesses, with entrepreneurs, with companies, and so forth, to discuss how can we do this. Is there a way, for example, to have tax relief? Because one of the things that they said that they wanted was no layoffs. Well, I mean, how is the government going to just unilaterally say no one can be fired from their job in Indonesia ever again? This is not realistic. So approach it in a realistic manner. Say, let's see if we can work on a way for there to be a, say a 6 month or a year suspension of or moratorium on layoffs in return for tax relief to companies or to employers. Something like this. Be realistic. Now we'll see if you're serious people or not. Because if you don't do this work over the next 6 months to a year, then the government was right to categorize you as unserious, disruptive people who didn't want to do anything except cause trouble. Now is the proof is in the pudding. If you're going to work on it now, then we know that you're serious people who want the best for Indonesia. If you don't, then that's why you got cracked down upon in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to prove that you really, really meant to pursue the progress and prosperity of Indonesia. Otherwise, like Shahid said, you're just meant to, just again throwing a tantrum and being provocative. That's it. Okay, so that basically wraps up the region's meeting agenda for Indonesia. I'd like to thank everyone who were present and thank Brother Ihsan's contribution, Brother Abu Bakar's contribution, and also Brother Muhtaram. If you're a brother, sorry if I'm not sure if you're a brother or sister, but that was very insightful, the point that you raised about President Prabowo's initiative to meet with the Muslim organizations. It's good to know that other than the Muslim organizations reaching out to the president also has reached out to other Muslim organizations. That's also good to know and assuring for the population. So once again, thank you again for attending, and we will have another meeting, I suppose, in a month's time. So Jazakallah khair for everyone's attendance, and Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.